Welcome. Welcome to Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church. Our service this morning is called The Courage of Zelensky. At the pivotal moment, I dropped my mic. I think Adrian is reminding us that we are doing paper joys and sorrows this morning. Just a reminder, if you might have something to share later in the service, she has paper and pencils for you. Good. So busy at the entrance this morning. It's good news. Yes, the paper and the pens will be at the very back there if you want to go and grab one later on. So I am the Reverend Dr. Suzanne Intriligator, and I am delighted to be with you here this morning. Originally, today's service was going to be all about the coming of spring, because you may not know it, but the vernal equinox, the exact moment when the sun crosses the celestial equator, marking the official start of spring, happens this morning at exactly 11:33 a.m., probably during coffee hour. Oh, Dan is really excited about that. The vernal equinox, yay! So it's really exciting that spring is upon us. Happy spring, everybody. Didn't we just all really need it to finally get here? Spring, of course, around here is also mud season, when we get rain and fog and sometimes even snow. Don't say it, don't even think it. But that makes for sometimes messy transitions in the world, doesn't it? And, at church, we also have a few messy transitions going on. For example, most of the local school systems have decided to go mask optional, but we haven't made that decision here at church. It may be in the offing, but not yet. So keep your mask on, please, but please do, if you would like, grab one of these colored wristbands in the front hall. They will let other people know about your relative comfort level with physical proximity. Red means, please give me some space. Yellow means, I'm happy to talk about it with you. And green means, ready for the hug. Dan is showing us his green wristband, yeah. Okay, so those are in the front hall too if you want them. They'll be more helpful down at coffee hour afterward. So, here with another live announcement about all the messy transitions coming on in church this morning is our board president, Dan Griscom. Dan, would you come forward and come to the lectern, please?
Good morning.
You might want to take off your mask, Dan.
It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. The church is making great strides to move beyond the pandemic, but there's still a lot of work to do. This church only functions through efforts of its leadership. Hello, there we go. Where was we? Nope, still not. Is that good enough? No. Nope. More. All right, good. Where was we? I'll just talk loud. This church only functions through the efforts of its leadership team. It takes dozens of hardworking people to make all this possible. For instance, after the service, we are going to have a real in-person coffee hour with coffee and delicious treats right outside the front door, organized by Beth and Kelly, so thank you them. One of the most important jobs right now is the nominating committee. Amy Cooper-Ailes, Karen Gabler, and Carol Nestor are working to fill up the slate so that when the leadership turns over this July 1st, we will still have dozens of hardworking people making all this possible. It's an important and vital job, but it can be time-consuming and frustrating. They can't just call 8 people and whoever answers the call first gets to be religious education chair. They have to call one person, wait for the response, and then based on that, perhaps go on to the next person. So, Amy, Carol, and Karen, thank you for all your work keeping this church alive and growing. And to those of you who get called by the nominating committee, even if you're sure you're going to say no, please answer the call or respond to the call and listen. If you decide to say no, they will say thank you and move on. If, on the other hand, you decide you want to open yourself to the idea of leadership, I'm sure you'll find it to be rewarding and vital. Thank you.
Also at coffee hour this afternoon after church, which as Dan said is going to be on the front lawn today thanks to the beautiful weather, members of our Green Sanctuary team will be there standing by to tell you about our spring congregational book read called Nature's Best Hope. The discussion will happen on March 28th. That's a week from tomorrow? The book is about how we can save species of wildlife, native species here in our own backyards. So see their table at the coffee hour or email Liz Folzer to borrow or buy the book so you can take part in the discussion. And you also probably likely know that March is Pledge Drive month here at church. Some of you have already sent in your pledges. Thank you very much. Here with an update about our Pledge Drive is one of the Pledge team's 2 co-captains this year. The other is Catherine Sezo, and here is Mary Ellen Fitzgibbon.
Good morning. Thank you to everyone who has returned their pledge forms. As of yesterday, we received 43 returns, pledging a total of $102,000. That is roughly 48% of our goal. Please remember to return your pledge either by bringing it with you next week to Celebration Sunday or through our pledge page on the MUUC website. Also remember to bring or send in your puzzle piece. And just as every piece of a puzzle is needed to complete the picture, we need everyone's participation in the pledge to achieve our financial goals and the vision for our church. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. And she neglected to mention also next week after church there's going to be a real party to celebrate the completion of our pledge drive. Worship itself will be a big celebration and kind of a party, and then afterward we'll actually have food and fun times together. So periodically in worship, we also feature a member who gives a testimonial, sharing about what church means to them. Here to share a testimonial today is a newish member, Lisa Wilson-Wright. Lisa, would you come forward, please? Oh, and her husband John is coming too. I didn't know that part. Oh, as her bodyguard, yes. And you can take off your masks if you want, but you don't have to.
Good morning, everyone, and happy spring. So before March 2020, John and I had long been thinking of giving the Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church a try. My family had been active members of the Catholic Church in the town I grew up in, and while I didn't miss Catholic doctrine, I sure missed the community that it came with it, that it provided. I also knew many church members, MUUC church members from around Melrose, and I thought, wow, a lot of cool people belong to that church. I should check it out. But we never seemed to make the time on our Sunday schedule. We always had something to do, we always forgot, whatever. We never made it to a service. Well, COVID and John's declining health changed all of that. Not only was my longing for a community stronger than ever, but we certainly had no plans on Sunday mornings. So we attended a remote service and we signed the guest book. And not surprisingly, Reverend Suzanne and multiple members of the church reached out to us to connect, to find out, who we were and what we were about. I joined a covenant group, and John and I decided to become members with the 2020 cohort. And we made our first pledge at that time as well to support our new community. And I'm really glad we did. The members of this church have welcomed us with open arms, and I might add, during a pandemic. So virtually, but yes, with open arms. Many members know of John's struggles and have reached out to help us in many ways by providing John a beautiful custom-made quilt, to helping with the laundry and meals, to lending an ear when I needed someone to talk to. And I do know that some members of this church even tried to find out if they were eligible kidney donors. And for those of you who didn't attend, Reverend Suzanne had an amazing ceremony, or sermon one weekend on altruistic kidney donation, which still just floors me. Whenever I need hope in the world, that's what I think of. And so I have been inspired by all this church does for the broader local and rural community. Church members move beyond words to take on social, racial, and environmental justice. They act on it. I also appreciate the church's efforts to make remote services available and meaningful. This means so much to those of us who have had to be extra cautious during the pandemic. Do you want to say anything now? Sure. Real quick.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody's support, and I'm looking forward to making new friends and spending more time with old friends. Thank you.
So, to finish, I long to join so many church groups, especially the choir. Last week's service was amazing. Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, our circumstances don't afford us the time to take an active role, other than making the occasional meal or joining in a social event. But John and I pledge each year to support not only the amazing work of the members, but the staff, equipment, and facilities that make this work possible. One day, we hope to support the church with our time, but for now, we are grateful to be in the position to support the Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church financially. I hope that each person attending this service, in person or remotely, will pledge whatever they can in terms of support or time or both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, John. That was beautiful. I call us to worship this morning with these words from Abraham Lincoln. Oh, wait, did I skip ahead? I think I did. Pardon me. Oh, I also wanted to give a quick thanks to Wendy Mestronardi, who's our Zoom chat host today, and Adrian, who's our in-person usher. And I almost forgot our moment of greeting. It used to be so important to us when we were all online. Now we're half and half. But it's a moment where we take time to wave to each other. If people have a green wristband, you can go ahead and shake hands or hug if you like. And then we also look at the people who are at home, and we wave to them, and we say welcome and good morning. And thank you for joining us today. Hi, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Now it's time to call us to worship. Oh, but we actually want to turn around and shake hands. Hello. A real moment of welcome. There are so many people in the room. You've got to take pictures. It's so exciting. So wonderful to be back together again this way. Oh, hooray. And now I will quiet us for a minute and call us to worship. With these words from Abraham Lincoln. As labor is the common burden of humanity, so the effort of some to shift their share of the burden onto the shoulders of others is the great, durable curse of humanity. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves and cannot long retain it. Why should there not be a patient confidence in the ultimate justice of the people? Is there any better or equal hope in the whole world? Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it. And now, we light the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. Here to light it for us this morning and to share a chalice lighting reading is our longtime member and friend, Kelly Whalen, who is also now the chair of the Property Committee and your host for our coffee hour food on the lawn this morning. Thanks so much, Kelly. You might need some help with that. I didn't light the little candle first.
I think I got it.
Okay, you got it.
I'm good at fire. We light this chalice in the memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who struggled for justice, and the love of those who've built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope.
Our opening hymn Our opening hymn this morning celebrates the coming of spring. It's the classic hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth. And for those of you in the sanctuary, it's number 21 in the gray hymnal. But we also have the words projected on the screen. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Standing and join me, please, in the words of our covenant, which is on the screen in front of you, followed immediately by the song of aspiration. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Thank you. You may be seated. Hello. Well, just yesterday, I was chatting with another UU minister, and she asked about the sermon that I was working on. What's it called? When I answered, The Courage of Zelensky, she said, oh, sorry, I can't help you with that. I haven't read that book. Well, of course, it's not a book, I told her, but I'm sure it will be someday. Now, I have to say now that I was a little surprised in the moment that my colleague didn't recognize the name of the president of Ukraine, given what's going on these days. But then I remembered that all of us, of course, have a different level of interest in and capacity for the news these days, and I was glad for the reminder. So, some of you may be familiar with our subject today, and some of you may not. Either way, though, I've chosen this story because It is an amazing story, and I believe it has profound spiritual meaning for all of us, which I will elucidate further in the sermon time today. For now, though, for this story section, while I try to explain to you and tell to you the story of someone called Volodymyr Zelensky, I have two little warnings for you. One, the story time will take a little longer today, but I have trimmed the sermon down to make up for that, I hope. The second warning is that there will be some swearing in this section, unavoidably so. It's not from me, I'll tell you that. And I will warn you again just before it happens. So, let us start with some background information, a little history lesson. Back in the fall of the year 2013, Ukraine had already been an independent nation for 22 years, but it struggled at that time to break free of the legacy of Soviet-era bureaucracy and the corruptive influence of its own Russian-allied oligarchs, who were still at that point manipulating and undermining every democratic reform. In the fall of 2013, for example, the freely elected parliament had voted to sign a treaty bringing Ukraine into a closer relationship with the European Union. But instead, at the last minute, the president, Viktor Yanukovych, known as the most corrupt leader in the world at that time, ditched that treaty and signed an agreement with Russia instead. Well, protests erupted across the country, and for months, thousands of ordinary Ukrainians came out every day and occupied public squares. In clashes with the police, more than 100 protesters died. After 3 months, Yanukovych and some other oligarchs fled the country. It came to be known as the Revolution of Dignity. At that moment, however, Ukraine was in a governmental crisis, and Russian President Vladimir Putin saw his chance, and he ordered an invasion of Ukraine. The Russian army took over Crimea, a strategic peninsula, and fomented armed uprisings in the two easternmost provinces, which have continued and escalated every day of the 8 years since. Now, watching all that upheaval in his country in 2013 and 14 was an up-and-coming young Ukrainian entertainer named Volodymyr Zelensky. Part of a tight-knit Russian-language comedy troupe, Zelensky had already earned a modest level of fame in his country, which was boosted when he won a national TV dance contest. And then again, when he got the starring voice role in the Ukrainian dubbing of the movie Paddington Bear. Then, in 2014, Zelensky and his young comedy troupe buddies made a pivotal decision. With their own production company, they created a TV show that would both dramatize the plight of average Ukrainians and give voice to their people's democratic longings and frustrations. In the debut episode, a clip from which I am about to show you, Zelensky himself stars as a humble high school teacher. He's a history teacher, importantly. Like all the country's teachers and doctors and police, he hasn't been paid in 2 months because the government doesn't function and because the country's wealth is constantly siphoned off by oligarchs. He has to take out a long-term loan even to buy a microwave, and then it doesn't work. In this pivotal scene, the teacher lives in a rundown apartment with his parents, his sister, and his niece, and he has to take out a loan for a microwave. In this pivotal scene, he loses his patience and goes on a long rant, which is secretly videotaped by one of his students. Now, I have to warn you again, there is a little bit of profanity in this rant. Well, there's a lot, actually. But it is voiced only in Russian. So, if you have sensitive folks around you who can read subtitles, you might want to give them something else to do for the next 2 minutes. But most of our kids are already in the RE program right now, which is fortunate. And I did email all the parents that I thought were likely to come in person today. So this first clip is from the first episode in 2015 of the show called Servant of the People, which you can actually now watch on Netflix if you want. You can get away with saying a lot more in a comedy than you can get away with anyplace else. So you saw how it ended. Have a simple teacher live like the president, and have a president live like a teacher. Well, you probably can guess what happened next, right? The kid in the scene posts that teacher's rant on YouTube, and everybody watches it. The teacher gets in a lot of trouble, and he apologizes to everyone for all the swearing, but not for telling the truth. The kids agree and they support him, as do their parents. In fact, pretty soon, the rant video has 8 million views. And then the kids run a crowdfunding campaign online to register their teacher in the presidential election. And then, guess what happens? A landslide. The teacher wins. And the oligarchs are confused. Wait, they ask, who is backing this rogue guy from nowhere? Which oligarch is funding and controlling him? Nobody knows. In the next clip I'm going to show you, the history teacher is stumbling through his first day on the job as president. Teams of masseuses, stylists, and vocal coaches are preparing him for his inauguration. Ukrainian viewers will recognize the shoot location. I read that this episode was filmed in the same lavish presidential mansion that Viktor Yanukovych had fled just a couple years before. Here, the super slick veteran prime minister has just handed the teacher his pre-written inaugural address. And unexpectedly, the teacher notices a slight problem with the text. But plagiarism doesn't sit well with the teacher. Later that night, the only night he would spend in the presidential mansion, his conscience troubles him, and one of his heroes appears to him in a vision. From that moment on, in this pivotal scene, Zelensky, the everyman president, rises to the occasion. Each week we take time out in our service to gather ourselves and reconnect as each of us feels called with the holy and with our own true ideals. Let's start by relaxing into our chairs, feeling our feet on the floor, letting our bodies settle. Let's breathe in and out together. To start our meditation time, first we'll join in our centering song, then we'll sit for a few minutes of shared silence. Then we speak to one another of our joys and sorrows, and then I will lead a prayer. Our worship theme for March is Renewing Faith. It's a month to reconnect with our values and to rebuild our community. Today specifically, we are renewing our faith in democratic values and in the strength of the human spirit rooted in community. Our centering song for the month is the first verse of the hymn, We Would Be One. Here is our choir performing it with a little extra video connecting it with our pledge drive theme of putting all the pieces together. Sing along as you like, and then we enter into shared silence. Every Sunday, we share with one another the joys and sorrows of our lives, our personal milestones. We listen to one another with openness and compassion, letting this sharing weave us together into an ever stronger community. First, if you have a sorrow to share today, please type it into the chat box if you are at home, and I will read them aloud. Adrian will bring forward the ones that have been written on paper by people here in the room. So let me look at the chat box. Do we have any sorrows from the people at home today? I don't see any in the chat. Wendy, am I wrong? Do we have any sorrows?
There are no sorrows in the chat.
Okay, Adrian, did we have any from people in the room?
A sorrow for continued uncertainty on so many levels for our family. That was from Lisa W.
Can we do that one again?
Yes. From Lisa W., a sorrow for continued uncertainty on so many levels for our family. Support for my friend's young son, Philip, hit by a car in Texas yesterday. May he heal quickly.
Thank you. Let's take a moment now. Is there another sorrow? There's one more coming. Thank you. Gosha writes, worry for my family in Poland. Let's hold all these sorrows together in our hearts for a moment. May those who are hurting today know that we care. May we reach out to them in kindness. We light one candle here as a beacon of care for all the sorrows that are spoken and unspoken today. And now we turn to the joys that you would like to share. Type them into the chat box and I will read them aloud. Adrienne, you want to go ahead with the joys from the room?
From Cheryl R., a joy. Got engaged about a month ago. Looking forward to new adventures ahead. From Lisa W., joy for the beautiful start of spring. And I'll add one from myself. Joy for this busy, crowded sanctuary today. Lovely to see.
That is a joy. And we have two more online. Let's see. From Martha B., candle of joy. Tomorrow we are driving to New Jersey and New York to celebrate with my grandson his first birthday. From Jane Foley, candle of gratitude for my writing group. We met yesterday, all of us together. From Ann Noonan, candle of gratitude that my adult children like each other enough to travel to Europe together, and that they will let me join them in Valencia later this month for Hannah's 28th birthday. Wonderful joys. Let's take a moment now to hold those joys in our hearts too, with gratitude.
And one more joy from Angela K. Was able to gather with my family yesterday and enjoy good food outside and then a music fest inside.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's hold all those joys with gratitude. Thank you for sharing them. They help us connect to one another and connect to the beauty of living. We light one more candle now to shine out our gratitude for all the many blessings in our lives. Thank you, Adrienne. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. This comes from the Reverend Eric Cherry. It's called A Prayer for People in War. Spirit of life, God of justice, Mother of creation. You call us to embody equity and freedom in our lives. You are present in every struggle to overcome oppression with peace and justice. And though our siblings in Ukraine are half a world away from us, we seek to be as near to them as we might in spirit and in prayer. Strengthen and encourage the noble cause of the citizens and religious leaders of Ukraine. Inspire wisdom, understanding, and compassion in the hearts and minds of the members of the Russian government. Comfort those who suffer in this and all struggles for peace and justice in our world. We seek to be useful instruments in solidarity with the people, all who are struggling, and so we rededicate ourselves to living lives examined through the lens of right relationship internationally. Our prayer is that in this very moment, wisdom and compassion will guide our hands and our hearts. May it be so. Amen. Now is the time for our offertory. Our church is a self-supporting organization funded by your generous annual pledge. Thank you. You may also contribute to our weekly collection plate, which we split every month with a good cause. You can donate either way using the orange button in the top right-hand corner of our homepage at Melrose UU. People here in the room can drop their donations in the gold plate on the way out. For March, our giving partner chosen by our choir is Shelter Music Boston, which delivers monthly chamber music concerts to homeless shelters and recovery centers. They provide classical music as a social service. And they were chosen again by our choir. Half of the collection this month will go to Shelter Music Boston. And now Tara has some special offertory music for us.
For our offertory music this morning, we'll take a glimpse into Ukrainian musical and folkloric culture. The band Goa was Ukraine's entry into the Eurovision Song Competition in 2021 with their song Shum. The title of the song literally means noise in Ukrainian, but it also refers to an ancient god or personification of the forest, as well as a springtime folk ritual involving songs and dances to awaken spring. This past week, I fell in love with this song for two reasons. First, to me, this song is a brilliant example of a modern rock band boldly claiming their ancient cultural heritage and repurposing it as a prayer to spring in a place that yearns for new life. But in addition to that, copying and pasting the title of this song in its original alphabet served as something of a portal into a heart of Ukrainian culture. Suddenly, I was watching hundreds and hundreds of school children and their teachers in flash mobs of this song, and hundreds more participating in traditional songs and dances, these many odes to spring. And my own heart broke open. Before Goa's video, we will view two other short clips. In the first clip, we'll view a sample of the original folk song that most directly inspired their work. And in the second, the band will briefly explain the inspiration behind the song and why they traveled to northern Ukraine to film their dystopian ode to spring in the woods near Chernobyl.
Well, I think I can guarantee you were not expecting that this morning. That is a cultural experience, definitely. Well, for my sermon. There's a very popular tweet that went around this week. You may have seen it. It was so popular that someone actually stitched the words of it into a needlepoint, like on those homey old-time pillows that maybe your mother had, and the photo of that went viral too. The words were like this. My new morning routine. 1, wake up. 2, check on Zelensky. 3, coffee. Unquote. So the world, or some remarkably large portion thereof, greets the morning these days by checking to see if Volodymyr Zelensky is alive. He has become a global folk hero, a unifying figure praised by people across the political spectrum and around the world. In 24 days? How did this happen? Well, his TV show, which we sampled earlier, ran for 3 seasons, and it became a huge hit, not just in Ukraine, but also in Russia, where Zelensky's production company made all 51 episodes available on YouTube, free. In March 2018, just 3 years after the show debuted, the production company registered its name, Servant of the People, as the name of a new political party in Ukraine. 9 months later, on New Year's Eve, Volodymyr Zelensky announced his candidacy for the real-life presidency of Ukraine. Instead of touring the country with stump speeches, Zelensky took out his phone and made short videos talking directly to the people via social media. Then in April 2019, there was another landslide, this one even bigger than the fictional one that happened to the TV teacher. This time, in real life, Zelensky was elected president of the Ukraine with 73% of the vote. Most Americans, however, would not have heard of him until a few months after that, when Zelensky became a central figure in our own 45th president's first impeachment trial. Do you all remember the perfect phone call? Do you know who it was with? That was in July 2019, and our then president was recorded on the phone with the new Ukrainian president, holding up the military aid he needed to fight the Russian army, which was still fomenting rebellion in the eastern provinces. Congress had already voted to send the aid, but what's-his-name was illegally holding it up, extorting Zelensky because we want you to do us a favor, though. Dig up some dirt on the American president's own election rival. What an impossible position for the young Zelensky to be put in, to be caught. But somehow he survived it, and he got the aid, and eventually, yes, 247 Republicans in Congress later voted to exonerate 45 for extorting Zelensky. And yes, just this past week, those very same people stand up and gave him a standing ovation after he spoke to Congress. Like his TV character, Volodymyr Zelensky has had a bumpy ride as president of Ukraine. Dismantling long-entrenched systems of corruption is far trickier than I had imagined until I watched the show. Because who can you trust? Who can you put in office that you know is not paid off or directly manipulated by oligarchs behind the scenes? Well, I guess only your friends and family, but if you hire them, that's a whole other kind of corruption, isn't it? Anya Moronyak is an investigative journalist at the Kiev Independent. She wrote, "Back in 2019, I did not vote for him. Like some other Ukrainians, I did not believe Zelensky, with no experience in politics, was suited for the job. His campaign was idealistic but lacked substance. He was vague, and he raised concerns about where he stood with Russia. He had his own powerful backer, the billionaire who owned the TV station that broadcast his show. I was not impressed with him. He promised to fight corruption, but I saw that his efforts were selective," unquote. And that was the first 2 years of his presidency. That's how it went. But then 24 days ago, everything changed, everything. Putin invaded Ukraine again, this time with a massive force intent on taking over the whole country as the world watched. Commentators around the world expected the country to fall within hours. After all, its military is 1/4 the size of Russia's. And it's alone. Although Zelensky and his predecessors had requested to join both the EU and NATO, they had been declined several times because Western powers want to keep from provoking Putin. So now no one is obligated to help them. According to the Times of London, since the Russian invasion on February 24th, Putin has assigned more than 400 mercenaries to find Zelensky and assassinate him. He is Russia's target number one. So on February 26th, American agents offered to rescue him and his family. And Zelensky famously replied, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." Later that night, he and his top aides came out onto the streets of Kiev. On his phone, he recorded a brief video selfie of all the men lit by streetlights, surrounded by familiar buildings. We are here, we are still here, we are not leaving. Since then, every day we've seen more photos and video. Zelensky in a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, unshaven, walking the streets, eating with soldiers, visiting hospitals, addressing the parliament, while bombs are falling from the sky. Russians are bombing the country relentlessly and targeting civilians. Of course, now the internet has gone wild for Zelensky. You can see images of him as Captain America, but actually it's Captain Ukraine now, all blue and yellow. There are countless photos that compare him to, he's wearing a flak jacket and a bulletproof vest, and compare him side by side with Ted Cruz in his suitcase going through the airport, or with President 45 in a golfing outfit. Across the political spectrum, commentators are now calling Zelensky a new Churchill or de Gaulle. Except I would remind them that Churchill's country was never invaded on the ground. And Charles de Gaulle actually left France and ruled from abroad during World War II. Who, like this Zelensky guy, who has stayed? What president actually stayed in his capital while it was under attack? I can't think of any. You might suggest George Washington, but he was not president during the Revolutionary War, and he was a wartime general then, not a TV comedian. You know who could help me think of other comparisons, other leaders in history who stood with their people no matter what? I'm thinking of a certain history teacher, that's pretty obvious. A teacher who dreamed about talking with Abraham Lincoln. You could also free your people, said imaginary Lincoln. But we don't have slavery, said the teacher. Do you think millions who bust their backs working to feed the elite aren't slaves? Now don't forget that Zelensky in that scene is not just an actor. He is the creator of the show, one of the writers, and one of the producers. The chief TV critic of the New York Times, James Pony-Wozniak, wrote, "Ultimately, Mr. Zelensky's TV show is an argument about the true source of political legitimacy. In its perhaps idealistic telling, power comes from being proximate to the people, not elevated above them. It comes not from being invincible, but from knowing people's precarity and sharing in their inconveniences. For example, after the election, the new president in the TV show continues to live with his parents in the cramped apartment." At his real-life inauguration in 2019, President Zelensky told lawmakers, "I do not want my picture in your offices. The president is not an icon, an idol, or a portrait. Hang your kids' photos instead and look at them when you are making a decision." Unquote. Then, in that inaugural speech, Zelensky shared how his 6-year-old son helped him realize that every one of us is president now. Everyone, Zelensky said, bears responsibility for Ukraine, for which Ukraine we will leave to our children. This is our shared dream, but we also have shared pains. But we will overcome all of it, for each of us is a Ukrainian. We have to be united, and only then are we strong. Of course, you have to contrast all of this to Vladimir Putin, who as leader of Russia for the past 22 years has extracted vast wealth from his country, becoming perhaps the world's richest oligarch himself, all the while personally curating an image as a symbol of old-school dominance and hierarchy. Last week, Putin aired a press conference in which he kept all of his yes men at a literal distance of 50 feet, and also publicly berated and shamed his chief of security. Last month, Putin joked about rape and decriminalized domestic violence. And of course, he has a long history of persecuting gay and lesbian people. And in our own country, Putin is often hailed by those on the far right as a world leader in the cause of white supremacy. The war in Ukraine is not just a battle between nations or systems of government. It is a battle of worldviews, a battle of values, On one side are those who believe in extractive economies and a hierarchy of human worth based on race and sex and wealth. And on the other side are those who believe in equality, democracy, and self-determination. This war is about all of our UU principles all at once. A few weeks ago, I told you about the contemporary philosopher Adrienne Marie Brown. Her emergent strategy posits that to survive this time of global crisis, humans must learn to imitate collaborative species like ants and fungi. Social movements must become decentralized, fluid, people like starlings in a murmuration, flowing in formation out of deep mutual trust. Trust the people, writes Adrienne Marie Brown, and they become trustworthy. Trust the people, and you become trustworthy. Trusting in his people, trusting in his dream of democracy, Volodymyr Zelensky has put his own life and even his young family on the line. And for it, he has become trustworthy, like no one else in living memory. The generals, the grandmothers, the investigative journalists, all those who doubted him before, and billions more around the world have rallied around him. And now he is a world symbol of democracy. And also, at the same time, just a man, just one man, with no superpowers at all, save a perhaps extraordinary courage. Like Lincoln, President Zelensky is trying to lead people to freedom, from warfare, but also from subjugation to elites, from corruption, from foreign influence. All he wants is safety and a functioning democracy, like the one that we have and we take for granted. He may not survive, nor his country, but his ideals must. His ideals are our ideals. In the past week, Zelensky spoke directly to leaders around the world. On Wednesday, he addressed the whole US Congress. The former fictional history teacher invoked Pearl Harbor, Mount Rushmore, 9/11, and Martin Luther King. He said, "Today, the Ukrainian people are defending not only Ukraine, we are fighting for the values of Europe and the world, sacrificing our lives in the name of the future. That's why today the American people are helping not just Ukraine, but Europe and the world to keep the planet alive, to keep justice in history." I think he's right about that, and it's a huge point, fighting to keep justice in history. Let me close as we started with the words of Abraham Lincoln. "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves and cannot long retain it." Like Zelensky, like Lincoln, let us here and everywhere have faith that right can make might. And in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it. Amen. And Slava Ukraini.
Our closing hymn this morning is "Love Will Guide Us." This song was originally written by Sally Rogers, as it is in our hymnal. However, since then, she has adopted newer verses by Brian Humphrey as her very own. And I am so excited to share these with you today. This morning, this morning, we will sing straight through each of the verses as it is on the sheet you received upon entry to the sanctuary, or as Wendy is now posting in the chat. Please rise in body or in spirit to sing together. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving,
guide us, love will guide us, peace has shined us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Thank you, Tara. Please, if you would remain standing and join me in the chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen. Thank you, and please be seated. Now we'll have a brief postlude from Tara, then folks on Zoom can stay in the room and have a chat. Folks in person can exit all the way out to the front lawn, and we can enjoy some conversation and lovely treats. Thank you, everyone, for worshiping with us today.